More than perhaps any other genre, fighting games offer the kind of mechanical depth that you can lose yourself in for years, learning the ins and outs, learning and perfecting combos, and so many other things that make this one of the most competitive genres in gaming, even on a professional level now. But you don't have to be playing against another human to be challenged in a fighting game. Throughout the years, this genre has thrown multiple final bosses at us that have got us all collectively pulling our hair out. In this feature, we'll be taking a look at 15 such fights. Mike Tyson, Punch-Out! One of the greatest athletes of all time is just as formidable in 8-bit form as he used to be in real life in his prime. Starring as the final hurdle in Punch-Out, Iron Mike Tyson pulled no punches. Right off the bat, he hurled a barrage of attacks at the player that required a series of precise dodges, while what followed was a series of fast, hard-hitting attacks that could make even the most seasoned players sweat. Alpha 152, Dead or Alive 4. Alpha 152 might be a bit lazy as far as visual design is concerned, in that she's basically a ghostly, translucent version of Kasumi, but that's where the similarities end. A few seconds into the fight, you come to realize that this is going to be a nightmare. Not only can she teleport behind you while you advance on her to deal major damage, but she also has one of the most erratic sets of attack patterns and movesets that you'll ever see for a fighter in Dead or Alive. Azazel, Tekken 6. One look at Azazel should be enough to tell you that this isn't going to be an easy fight, seeing as he takes up half the screen and towers over your puny form, and his looks certainly don't deceive. Frame priority, deadly combos, and hard-hitting attacks are a combination that is every fighting fan's worst nightmare, and Azazel is the poster boy of that combination. M. Bison, Street Fighter II. The iconic Bison is iconic for a reason. A large part of that reason is the way he clobbered millions of gamers in Street Fighter II. His lightning-fast moves and unpredictable attacks made him an absolute nightmare, from being able to leap across the screen and stomp on top of you to infusing himself with energy and turning into a deadly projectile. Gil, Street Fighter III. Clearly, Capcom looked at the maddening fight against M. Bison in Street Fighter II and decided they wanted to outdo themselves, and they came up with the Gil boss fight in Street Fighter III, which is challenging in all the wrong ways. From being able to resurrect himself, to having a combination of deadly attacks, to having supers that can one-shot you, Gil is a fight that has bested many Street Fighter III players. Seth, Street Fighter IV. Not wanting to break their streak of having impossibly challenging final bosses in Street Fighter games, Capcom really outdid themselves with Street Fighter IV's Seth, who's perhaps the single most frustrating boss you'll ever come across in the entire series. Incessant multi-kicks and his jack-of-all-trades arsenal of moves are only the tip of the iceberg as far as Seth is concerned. Shao Kahn, Mortal Kombat 2. The face of villainy in Mortal Kombat, Shao Kahn has been the bane of many a gamer across many Mortal Kombat games, and the final encounter against him is definitely up there among the most challenging. Thanks to his deadly charge attacks and how he demanded players to have lightning-quick reflexes, Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat 2 was the cause of countless broken controllers. Galactus, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Galactus feels like a culmination of all the ways Marvel vs. Capcom bosses have frustrated players over the years, and there's no shortage of those. For starters, he's so huge he literally fills the screen. Then there's his incessant laser attacks, his minions who you have to beat before you can fight him, attack animations that are really hard to telegraph, not to mention his attacks that can wipe you out at a moment's notice. Dural, Virtua Fighter. Don't let Dural's looks deceive you, but the actual fight against her can really test your mettle, as Virtua Fighter so often did. That's not because she has a particularly impressive moveset or makes use of any unfair tactics. No, it's because if you lose to her, that's it for you. It's game over. You go all the way back to the beginning of the arcade mode. You only get one shot, so learn her patterns, fight at your best, and make sure you take her out in one go. The General, Kaiser Knuckle. Kaiser Knuckle might not be the most popular or well-known fighting game out there, but one element of the experience that is notorious among veteran fans of the genre is its final fight against the not-so-imaginatively named General, or more specifically, how cheap and unfair that fight can be. From spamming sidekicks to teleportation attacks that are literally impossible to read, to slams and a whole lot else, the General's repertoire of moves is an absolute nightmare to contend with. Shao Kahn, Mortal Kombat 3. Oh, but Mortal Kombat 2 wasn't the only time Shao Kahn sent players into flying fits of rage. Far from it. He came back again, not much later, in the very next installment. In fact, with a fight that was just as challenging, and in many ways, even more so. Rugal Bernstein, the King of Fighters 94. SNK fighters have, over the years, gained immense notoriety for having boss fights that feel outright cheap and broken at times, and Rugal Bernstein is perhaps the poster boy of such boss fights. As if his regular attacks aren't horrifying enough as it is on account of how much damage they can deal, in his second stage, Rugal also starts throwing darts and fireballs at you like a maniac. Mizuki, Neo Geo Battle Coliseum. Speaking of boss fights in SNK fighters that can haunt your nightmares for years, Mizuki, the final fight in the oft-overlooked Neo Geo Battle Coliseum, is no slouch in this area either. It seems he knows how to counter every single one of your moves, and invariably, almost all these counters involve fireballs. To be fair, Mizuki isn't quite as tough as some of the other bosses in this list, but he can still be a bit of a prick. Shao Kahn, Mortal Kombat 9. Essentially a reboot of the series, it felt fitting that Shao Kahn would return with his whooping ways, and he did so in full force in 2011's Mortal Kombat. Fighting him in the final showdown was no easy task, mostly because of how cheaply he could beat you, with unfair defense advantage, a propensity to spam his best attacks, and even his regular attacks hitting harder than you'd expect. Eternal Champion, Eternal Champions. The fight against the Eternal Champion was frustrating enough to give you anger management issues. It almost felt like the game was rewriting its own rules just so it could challenge you. And challenge you it did. While the player had to shoot projectiles with limitations, the Eternal Champion could spam projectile attacks constantly, and you had to beat him 5 rounds in a row to come out victorious. If you lost, well, you went back 3 fights, with the knowledge that once you made it back, you'd have to fight this monster again. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.